There's the other point I needed to mention. So housekeeping, this meeting is being recorded, and that's so that we can share this with more people. It will be up on the council's YouTube channel after the meeting. And secondly, we're going to be quite tight on time, so our speakers are going to talk for about 8 minutes each. And if you've got any questions, could you put them up during the chat? And if they're individual questions, they'll make an effort to answer those during this meeting. But if you've got a question for the panel, we'll come to those in the last 15 minutes of the session. So please do put in any questions as they occur to you as we go along. So before we get cracking, I just wanted to show you a couple of slides of pictures from my ward, because every councillor likes to talk about their own patch. And this is really just to make two very simple points. So Moorlands Ward is in southwest Bath, as I said, and I think it's fair to say we've got a legacy of some really beautiful trees that were planted a long time ago. On the left-hand side, you can see a really nice, I think it's a beech tree, apologies if I got that wrong, a tree in Moorlands Park, which is full of these just glorious old ancient trees, and that's my son climbing it. It's one of his favourite spaces. And then the Moorlands estate as a whole, I think, is prized for its lovely design in terms of green spaces. It was built after the Second World War, and it's got some really lovely, well-established, mature trees all across the site. And you can just see a view there down Chantry Mead Road, which shows you all those lovely open front lawns and trees. But of course, it's not all perfect, and we do see trees felled and either succumb to disease or causing issues to properties. So there are tree stumps around the patch, which takes me on to my next slide. Thanks, Michaela. And one of the things that struck me since being a councillor is how many people care about the trees in our area. And I think that the reason for this is the basic point of longevity, that trees outlive us largely. And one of the best things I think we can do as human beings is plant something that's there for the next generation. So I've included this quote here, that the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. And here's an example of some of the planting projects that have taken place just in my patch over the last couple of years. So firstly, there's a big community orchard that's actually been planted by residents with some support from Cllr. On the bottom left, we held a community planting with more trees for BANES, and you'll hear from Adam later on. And that was a brilliant event, getting people out and about, planting trees in local green spaces, but also taking trees back to their gardens to plant. And then in the bottom right is a lovely cherry tree, I think, that was planted by the council, and which me and other neighbours have helped to water over the last 2 years. And to see it come into blossom this spring was really lovely. I think it's really setting in roots now. And then finally, just to make the point that obviously all these trees don't survive. We do see broken trees, we see trees that just die during the summer months. So we need to plant more trees than we actually need. So moving on from my thoughts, I'm going to hand over to Mark Cassidy, who's going to tell you more about the council's objective to plant 100,000 trees and how we're going to do that. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Jess. I'm going to constrain myself by reading most of this because we'll be here all night. So I'm Mark Cassidy, Tree and Woodland Officer, and I'm responsible for, I suppose, leading on the Tree and Woodland Delivery Plan. Now, this came about as BANES declared a climate and ecological emergency in 2019 and set a target of carbon neutrality by 2030. As a direct action, it stated an ambitious target of planting 100,000 trees by May 2023, which will contribute to carbon neutrality, improved ecology, and to the West of England Nature Partnership and Forest of Avon plans to double tree and woodland cover in the West of England by 2050 and 2060 respectively. At the time, the BANES cabinet member stated we would create a detailed tree and woodland plan showing where trees will deliver most benefit and how the planting and future management will be resourced in partnership with communities, volunteers and landowners. So in our plan, our key objectives were carbon capture and ecological enhancement because of the climate and ecological emergencies, plus of course other benefits that trees offer, such as air quality and green infrastructural benefits, such as stormwater runoff, for instance. For it also to be a live working document with annually renewed outcomes, so it's not something that sits on a shelf. In addition, for it to work strategically to the West of England Nature Recovery Networks and the Forest of Avon Plan Priorities and Actions, because that came out in July of this year. And so in addition to that, for it also to improve our local baseline data, so that's understanding our existing cover and its carbon value, review publicly accessible land and planting potential of that land, reviewing funding streams, grants, donations and adoptions, asking stakeholders what would assist them in planting trees, and understand other models of encouraging tree planting. Can I have the next slide, please? So with the land appraisal overview, most publicly accessible land is urban, but most has designated uses such as football pitches, etc., with insufficient potential to plant the volume of trees that we'd like to, i.e. 100,000. The overview, the land appraisal also found that there were proportionately more urban trees than rural trees. Bath City has an average tree canopy cover of 22%, which is about, well, it's double the southwest average, which is at 11%. However, total woodland cover measured at areas over 0.5 hectares is 2,892 hectares, or 8.25% of B&NES total area. That statistic is actually lower than the England average, which is a 10% cover of woodland. However, when combined, total average tree canopy cover in B&NES, that's woodlands that are over 0.5 hectares, and everything else besides, so that might be trees in hedgerows, groups of trees and individual trees in parks. The total area, the total percentage cover in B&NES is 16.5%, which is slightly higher than the England average, and it equates to 5,937 hectares.
Mark,
we find that trees in B&NES. Yeah.
Mark, I'm sorry, the audio's a bit crackly for me, and I was just wondering whether if you could turn your video off, it might improve the audio.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Don't worry, don't worry. Is that better?
Yes.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yes, seems to be, Mark.
Yeah, fab. So trees in B&NES sequester approximately 52,008 tonnes of carbon per annum and currently store 456,258 tonnes of carbon. However, you'll appreciate that there is more potential to plant rural trees than urban trees, simply due to the higher quantity of land that there is rurally in B&NES. In our urban land appraisal, we reviewed B&NES land, so that's the land that it owns, the highway network, school land and social housing land, in order to identify the maximum planting potential that we had some sort of influence over. We particularly looked at areas that were over 0.05 hectares in order to derive the highest volume of planting potential, i.e. for carbon and ecological benefit. We also looked for areas within nature recovery networks, so that's the West of England nature recovery networks, areas within 100 metres of air quality management areas, and areas, wards of low canopy cover, as well as actions in the Forest of Avon plan. Within our review, we clipped out areas in proximity to buildings, areas that were near or over underground vaults. So much of the city centre core of Bath have underground cellars and vaults. So we clipped those out. Priority grassland habitats, ancient monuments, and of course, existing trees. So I think it's worth noting that we as B&NES Council and officers of such that don't have direct control of the majority of land that's in B&NES, but we would no doubt try to work with partners via initiatives to unlock and encourage tree planting. Next slide, please. So we looked at rural land, and I have just kind of counted that much of that is out of our direct control. But we looked to engage with stakeholders that were interested in acting to plant trees in rural bays. So stakeholders we consulted said that they were struggling with the availability of land for planting and knowing where best to look in the first place. That there was grant confusion. There were many grants out there and very complex. We had need for help and advice, and need for ongoing maintenance to ensure that the trees that we plant succeed. We also found that they felt that opportunities were that there is reasonable money out there for tree planting and some for establishment, and that there were good numbers of willing volunteers and organisations wanting to support the planting of trees. I think at the start of the delivery plan, we kind of realised that we really needed to work in parallel with the plan, and we procured woodland opportunity mapping. So the woodland opportunity mapping isn't something that's concluded yet, but soon will be. And this will help with the point mentioned above in terms of identifying where to look for in the first place regarding land for tree planting. So we created woodland opportunity mapping for rural bays, which will be an online resource to help locate landscape areas within bays best suited to planting different sized categories of woodland, from small groups to large-scale woodlands. The mapping excludes a comprehensive range of unknown constraints and takes into account landscape sensitivity assessments to reveal the best general landscape areas for tree planting. It will include links to planting guidance for each landscape type stroke character area, alongside the tree and woodland sensitivity assessment and guidelines. The map and guidance will be published in probably 3 weeks' time, and we will add it to a web page, a tree planting web page that we host at B&NES to complement the tree and woodland delivery plan. In addition, B&NES planning policy team will be reviewing and updating tree and woodland policy in the new local plan, in line with fast changing national government guidance. So that's that element. So next slide, please, Ms. Tyler.
Mark, I'm sorry. I think the slides have gone out of order.
Don't worry.
Is this the slide that?
This is the final slide.
Yes, this one.
Yeah, future. So it's our work stream from now on, really. So our priority actions now are to complete the current plan scheme that we worked up in parallel with writing the delivery plan. So those are the planting schemes on the council's own land and streets. And we have very generous funding from the Forest of Avon, who are here tonight, and obviously work up carefully designed new plans for subsequent years. We intend to launch a One Tree Per Child project, an international initiative. This is actually happening in Bristol already, but it's a school tree planting project that combines eco education. It's aimed at giving every child the chance to plant a tree and watch it grow. Years ago, I did many of these, and they're very enjoyable, very rewarding. You can really see the children glowing. I'm really engaged in it, to be honest. We will create a B&NES virtual forest. There's a West Midlands virtual forest, which helps to record trees that are planted by a suite of members of the public and volunteers out there planting. And it will also act as a community call to action, so everybody will feel engaged in a collaborative effort to plant trees. We'll continue with our tree giveaways, of which have been very successful. So in October, we'll be running another one of those, a larger one of those in actual fact. We will create, as I've referred to before, a BANES tree planting website, and that will include details of the delivery plan and its research elements that have helped us, that have helped inform it. Improved guidance and signposting to the grants that are available, primarily to the Forest of Avon. It will direct donations to a site that I intend to add to the Forest of Avon site, a replant BANES site that will attract voluntary donations. It will obviously link towards opportunity mapping. In addition to the site, we will support the Queen's Green Canopy, a project that will happen over the course of this and next year. I will be reviewing a tree adoption site, so a method of people adopting trees for a period of time, therefore raising an income and growing tree numbers. Particularly, I think we will have to work with partners to drive up private tree planting, so creating planting forums, potentially a tree warden scheme. So working with other people to really target private tree planting. And through all of this, really, I think is primarily important to say that we will cross-reference our actions to the Forest of Avon plan so that it's strategically viable actions. And of course, we will continue to monitor and review, i.e. if we're to hope to demonstrate that we are carbon neutral by 2030, highly vulnerable trees play to be monitored from here onwards in order for us to, I suppose, link to BANES's commitment to delivering that. So that's me done there.
Thank you, Mark. And apologies to anyone who's had. Just go on mute, Mark. Just go on mute, Mark.
Sorry. Yes. Okay.
So apologies to everyone for the sound quality. As ever, we're learning through Zoom. But Mark, thank you for going through or giving us a high-level overview of the Council's Tree and Woodland Delivery Plan. That is something that will be published shortly, so there'll be more information in the public domain about what the Council are doing. So we're now going to go over to Alex Stone from the Forest of Avon, who's going to give us a more strategic view of tree planting. Thank you.
Hi, so it's great to be here, and it's really fantastic to see a Climate and Biodiversity Festival at BANES. It's really important that we get the word out about what we're doing, really for one reason, and that's so we can do more of it. So the more people that hear about the opportunities and what's going on, the more individuals we can talk to about how they can get involved. So the Forest of Avon Trust, if you don't already know, is one of England's community forests. We're a charity, and we operate across the west of England, basically bringing partners together, bring groups together, individuals, working with everyone across the region to achieve, as Mark has mentioned, actions from the Forest of Avon plan, which was launched in partnership with West of England Nature Partnership and lots of other partners in June, working together to create that document, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But just a bit of general sort of context, we're talking about biodiversity, we're talking about climate, we're talking about communities, we're talking about forests. I think the thing that links that all together is lives. We're talking about changing lives, we're talking about reducing suffering and decline. We're talking about increasing our well-being and joy that we get from all the benefits of trees, from biodiversity and from a healthy climate. So if we think of all the things that we do on a daily or monthly basis, which we might call the essentials, so brushing our teeth, paying up our pensions, paying our mortgages, all the different tasks that we do, not because it's fun necessarily, but because we're investing in our future. We aim to see trees as this essential, as one of those essentials that we need to add into our daily or monthly or yearly lives and say, right, as part of the plan, it's can everyone plant one tree every 10 years in the region, and then we'd meet our target of doubling tree cover. So how can everyone get involved, and how can we help those people who aren't already involved or who face barriers to getting involved? How can we help those people to engage as well? And we're talking about planting new trees, but we're also talking about caring for our existing woodlands, because only 45% of our woodlands across the west of England currently are effectively managed, and we're also facing ash dieback, which is going to affect 16% possibly of our trees across the region. So it's a really massive issue that means we need to be planting those trees just to stand still on our tree numbers. So the Trees for Climate programme, along with many others, so there are other organisations who offer fantastic grants such as the Woodland Trust, the Forestry Commission with the new UCO grant, but we've got alongside those, the Trees for Climate programme, which is operating as part of the England's community forests in the B&NES region, and it allows us to do lots of activity and essentially treat it as a really sort of flexible and full activity across the region, including through B&NES. So every tree we put in now, and not in 20 years, as Jess has highlighted through the quote earlier, is 20 years more of the tree and those benefits from those. So I'll just share my slides now with you, just very briefly. Hopefully you can all see that. So what is the Trees for Climate Fund? Well, Trees for Climate Fund is a DEFRA fund which, as I said, has come through the England's community forests. So Forest of Avon Trust independently oversees our share of that fund to plant as many hectares of trees as we can across the region. And here is a fantastic example of that with Grow for Life and Bath and North East Somerset Council planting 1,500 trees on the Bath skyline, which created lots of different benefits, including sort of shading out amenity and just all sorts of different carbon benefits, biodiversity, and a really fantastic project. And it also involved the community in planting those trees, which is another, the actual action with tree planting can be as beneficial as the trees themselves. So we launched in December 2020 and planted 15.5 hectares across the west of England from December to March. And this year we're looking at upscaling that massively to up to 75 hectares, but there's potential for more as well. And we fund up to 100% of the costs of the schemes, and also costs like community engagement and ongoing maintenance of the trees. So it's a really flexible scheme. What we can fund and support, well, we can provide different levels of support depending on the project and the landowner who wants us to get involved and how much involvement you want us to have. But we can fund all types of trees, so orchards, hedgerows, wood pasture, natural regeneration, and lots of different types of woodland. So it really is flexible. And if we can't fund it through Trees for Climate, we can often have funds available to fund it in other ways. So do get in touch with us if you have any ideas about where trees could be planted. Here's just some quick details there. And other opportunities across the region are Anna, our Tree Woodland Officer for B&NES and North Somerset, runs some of the Bathscape work in woodland management, so going out to sites and working out woodland management plans for different sites. So if you've got a site that you think could do with a management plan, get in touch with us. Planting in schools and giving talks and engaging with pupils with education is something we do a lot of. The Forest of Avon pledge, so any organisation or business can get in touch with us and sign up to our pledge, which is all about just raising awareness and starting that conversation with us about how you as an organisation can support the Forest of Avon. And the Rooting for Us All Together project is something we're hoping to launch next year, and we're running it through the Big Give appeal in December, which is all about reaching out, as I said at the start, to those individuals who are facing barriers to getting involved with us, so that we're not just talking to people that approach us, but we're going out there into communities as much as we already are, but more so, and identifying where those gaps are, where we're not planting trees or we're not engaging with individuals. And this is just to highlight how the Forest of Avon plan looks and how it can address different areas. So I've just highlighted Bath and Onvron's Bathscape area here, and you can see within each different area the different actions that can be taken within that region to help support your local trees and woodlands. So it's worth having a look. It's all on our website. As I say, launched through a massive partnership of organisations, including all the 4 authorities and Bath and North East Somerset Council. So it's a very sort of collaborative project. It's on our website to have a look at and see where you can get involved. And again, contact us if you want to get involved further. and there are lots of different actions from the plan, which we are currently working with all our partners to engage with in terms of lots of different things. So how we can build it in more climate resilience, how we can capture all the data as a whole and support BANES and everyone else in capturing all that data. So and ash dieback, for example. So lots of different projects will emanate from the plan that again people can get involved in, and we can filter out that data. And hopefully this time next year we'll have lots more to show and show you all the sort of carbon metrics and everything that will be coming from all of the tree planting that's happening across the region. That's just a great picture of the Root for Us All Together campaign.
Brilliant, thank you, Alex. That was really helpful. I've just seen a question come up about whether we can share the slides, and I think your links and contact details, Alex, would be really useful. So yes, we'll be able to do that after the meeting. I wondered if I might also just cheekily jump in, Alex, and ask if you could pick up the question from Eileen O'Donnell about engaging farmers. Is there anything specific that Forest of Avon is doing there?
Yeah, so in terms of Trees for Climate, that was launched December, and we didn't have a lot of time, but we managed to get it into the, I think, NFU and the CLA newsletters. So, but what we hope to do this year would be to be going around to in-person events, so the farm shows and lots of different activities to get engaging face-to-face with people much more. Obviously, it was quite restricted last year, so we're really hoping we can build that up. But if anyone's got any other ideas about how we can get communications out, then do let us know. In terms of different landowners, we're thinking about what we can do in garden centres, what we can do. So and I think Mark's got some ideas as well about tree giveaways sort of around areas where there might be farming activity. So very welcome to ideas.
Brilliant, thank you, that was great. Okay, so we'll now move on to our third panelist. We're doing pretty well on time, which is good. So Ben Moss is going to talk to us about Chew Valley plant trees. Thanks, Ben.
Hello, there we go. I changed myself. I got myself out of where I was and I've taken myself into the field. So I'm zooming from a piece of land that I own in the Chew Valley. So I haven't got any slides, but you can go put some of the trees in the background. And with the light fading, I hope I stay illuminated. And I also hope that the gods of the internet are kind and make this connection work. Is it sounding okay?
All good so far.
Great. Okay, so listening to what Mark and Alex have been saying, I'm really inspired by the work that they do, and the Chew Valley Plants Trees endeavour emerged out of the climate and ecological emergencies that were declared a couple of years ago now, and local people in the area here in the Chew Valley saying, how can we increase tree cover? How can we rapidly scale that up? And hearing the targets for Bath and North East Somerset and Wecker for 2050 and 2060, we're jumping way ahead of that. And we want to see the tree cover here in the Chew Valley doubled in the next 8.5 years. We said we wanted to do that by 2030, and that's what we're aiming for. It's, to me, 8.5 years actually feels like quite a long time to create the cultural change that we need to see here in the Chew Valley. The Chew Valley is predominantly a farming area, and our tree cover here is at 7%, according to the National Forest Inventory, compared to England 13 and the UK 17. We're very low here, which is a difficult conversation to have with people, because people say, oh, it's the Chew Valley and it's this green and pleasant land and it's full of trees. And there are many trees here, but there need to be much more. And the work that we're doing here really is also inspired by what the Climate Change Committee told us, and indeed what the Conservatives have committed to by saying that they're going to commit to 30 million trees a year, which is somewhere equivalent to 3/4 of the Isle of Wight planted out trees every year, then we want to see things happening really quickly. You know, there's also because we're voluntary and independent, the work that we're doing is in response to what we see with the climate and ecological emergency that is going to get potentially very bad very quickly. So the best way we can deal with that is by planting trees. And this seminar is really cool because it talks about planting trees for climate and biodiversity, but a big part of what we're doing here in the Chew Valley is to talk about trees within the landscape and within farming and within food production. And so we're really interested in having conversations with farmers and landowners and saying, how can we integrate trees into the landscape so that we're also increasing food production? People look at the landscape here and they see that there are beautiful big fields with trees in, but not too long ago, these fields were also full of orchards and other trees. We had huge amount of elm trees here before the 70s, and the ash is a tree which has a lot of representation here that we may well lose. The orchards that were here, and you can see, recognizing the names of the farms around here, like Walnut Tree Farm and Barn, those orchards have left. So really what we're trying to do is reintroduce an idea of what the landscape, you know, back to the future, as it were, try and get people to understand that trees were a big part of this landscape, and these large fields that you see were actually subdivided into smaller fields. So wanting to be brief and not stretch on too long, I think one of the things that we're really trying to do in figure out how to fulfill this endeavor is with the question of how will we do this? How will we double the tree cover in the Chew Valley in the next 10 years or so? What we've got is a bunch of tools that we've used. So we have a map with the tree planting opportunities, and we have looked at the landscape and we've seen lower grade agricultural land, which is often on steep slopes, and we've identified that as really suitable for planting out with trees. And indeed, historically, often it was. We've also gone with that map. We have got in contact with landowners directly, and we're often doing that by actually going to the land registry and saying, who owns that piece of land? And we have been contacting those farmers directly and saying, hey, we want to talk, we want to meet you. You know, the question, how do we meet people? We had a fair here recently, the Chew Stoke Harvest Home. We sent invites to landowners around here and said, hey, come along to our stall and talk to us, and let's talk about how we can double the tree cover. That has been successful. We have now had farmers coming forward to us and saying, okay, let's talk about things. How can we do this? We're also working as a network by figuring out what funding is available, what's out there, what professional advice or even anecdotal advice is there out there for advice on, say, agroforestry, for silver pasture, for woodland grazing. So we're connecting with the network that we have here to offer expertise and advice to farmers who are sort of thinking about it. And really what we're hoping for is an outlier, a pioneer farmer who will be like, you know what, I can see the climate and ecological emergency happening. I can see that food security is a massive issue. I can see that there's a great benefit for the community in doing this. I'm up for getting involved in this. So you know, these conversations are happening, and I've got high hopes something will come from that, something really positive. And I suppose that the last thing to say is, yeah, in seeing ourselves as a network, we also connect with people who want to plant trees. There are lots and lots and lots of people who want to get out and plant trees. The real question is, where can we put those trees? There's also questions of expertise and making sure that if you're going to be planting higher value trees, that you're training people up and making sure that they're putting that apple tree in with some skill. But that's a fun project to be involved in, and we can have tree planting champions, and the more people get involved, the more they can pass on that information. There are also questions about, where do we get the trees from? What opportunities are there for micro enterprises of tree nurseries? All of this stuff is part of the how do we do this, but we've got a lovely website. We've had a lovely film made for us on Country File. We've got a lot of local interest. We've got a lot of people wanting to get involved. So, you know, we're going for it. We're going to keep on reflecting on our progress and keep on reflecting on who we're working with. And with this ambition, we hope also that others around the area will also raise their ambitions and say, yeah, let's get there quicker. Let's keep on planting trees, right tree in the right place, but doing it for food production, doing it for biodiversity, doing it for community, doing it for employment. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. That's really inspiring. Just a quick question for me before we move on. What kind of scale of planting are you talking about when you're talking to landowners or farmers in particular?
Well, a lot of the landscape around here is divided into sort of family farms, which depending on your sense of scale are often termed as small, so 15 acres or thereabouts. There are people out here, there are families who often rent out that land to other farmers. They're the people we're trying to talk to. Realistically, you know, planting out a few acres to trees, like converting 5 acres to an orchard, is a massive endeavor, but you can also scale those things up relatively quickly. So, you know, we'd love to do this at, you know, 1 acre at a time, 2 acres at a time, but realistically we also need sort of a 25-acre farm that will be taken out on. But we've got the know-how. We just want to get it happening.
Brilliant. Looking forward to hearing about progress. Great. Okay, so we'll move on to Adam from More Trees for Bath and North East Somerset. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jess. Right, let me see if I can share my screen with you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Adam.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Let me know if it gets bad. I'll turn my camera off. But here we go. Brilliant. Excellent. Thanks so much. So I'm Adam Gretton. I'm founder and chair of More Trees for Bath and North East Somerset. And I'm also non-exec director for Grow Yourself, which some of you will know is the organisation behind the Urban Garden. And we've set up a not-for-profit garden centre in Bath. But yeah, More Trees Baines, so we've been planting trees for the last 13 years. We've recently, in the last couple of years, shifted our focus to growing trees from scratch, and I'll explain why. And we've actually decided to partner Grow Yourself and More Trees Baines on this community tree nursery project. And our supporters, we've recently secured some funding, and you can see our funding partners at the bottom there. So yeah, just thinking about tree planting, I'm actually going to start with a bit of a problem with tree planting, but I'm going to explain how, you know, we're hoping to, you know, address that with our project being part of the solution, and explain, you know, what we need from you, how we can link up with other organisations to, you know, help each other achieve our mutual aims. But yeah, I guess starting with the problem. So I mean, you know, everyone on this call will be aware of ash dieback disease, been mentioned already. There's 150 million trees in the UK, and some reports believe that 95% of them will die. And economists have calculated the cost being nearly 15 billion, which is actually quite a lot more than what the foot and mouth outbreak cost 20 years ago. You know, and this disease came to our shores because tree planting organisations were finding it cheaper to buy ash trees and other trees from other countries and importing them. And it's not just ash dieback disease though. You know, there's the oak processionary moth, there's Dutch elm disease, there's bleeding canker, sweet chestnut blight. I'm not going to try and pronounce this one. Where's it going? But because I'm not a botanist, but it's affecting alder, juniper, and cypress, I believe, as well. So, you know, there's a lot of problems that have been imported, and a lot of these pests and diseases have come about because we've been importing trees from abroad to save some money. And so that there's a biosecurity problem there. And there's also the issue, you know, if you're planting trees for carbon purposes, that's why I'm in this. I'm wanting to, you know, help slow down climate change. Well, if you're buying your trees and transporting them hundreds of miles away, then, you know, you're starting with a carbon debt before you've put it in the ground. But there is also then, just the problem of supply generally, the demand for trees is increasing. You've heard about some really ambitious tree planting targets and some fantastic projects underway. But a lot of projects are now finding actually they're struggling to get the stock. There's some temporary or hopefully temporary issues with things like Brexit and the pandemic that's causing problems with supply chains. But there's also just not enough being grown. Nurseries are expanding, but not fast enough. And in fact, I found an academic study, it's in the US, but they're talking about how for the US to hit their tree planting targets, nurseries are going to need to more than double their production, and they're not getting there fast enough. So there's just not enough trees being grown, and a lot of these projects, unfortunately, are going to suffer by not getting the stock that they need. So if that's the kind of problem that many people have identified, what's the solution? Well, we think it's staring us in the face. All around us are little pockets of ancient and semi-natural woodland where we can find indigenous trees that are producing plenty of seed, more than enough. So what we're doing is really simple. We're going out and collecting that seed from ancient semi-natural woodland. We're setting up community nurseries. We've got 3 in Bath, and we're hoping to set them up all across BAMES. And our aim is to be hyper local. So, I think everyone on this webinar will be aware of the benefits of local provenance. If you're growing plants from plants that are thriving locally, then you'd expect, the next generation of plants to do well. And we're just trying to take that to a really extreme degree. So we're keeping a record of exactly which batches of seed were collected from where, and we're going to grow them in the nearest nursery, and then we're going to plant them out as close as possible to that parent woodland. So as I said, 3 nurseries. There's 2 that are set up and actually full of trees already, and there's a 3rd in construction. And each one's a little bit different. We've adapted our approach each time. This one here, we didn't quite have deer proof straight away, hence the plastic cards, but I'm pleased to say we've got it deer proof now. We've had to adapt the approach each time depending on the local conditions, depending on the landowner, what their requirements are, what community groups are around, and so each nursery is set up slightly differently. And this is the next one we're setting up at Walnut Springs. And it's a huge amount of work. It'd be a lot easier to just buy the trees and stick them in the ground. I'm finding this is probably about 10 times as much work, but it's really rewarding. We're learning more and more every day, and I'm really keen to develop more networks with everyone on the call. I know we're exploring partnerships with some of you already, and really keen to deepen those relationships so we can learn from each other. But what we're really excited about, what we're laser focused on, is this focus on ancient and semi-natural stock. And I could probably talk for an hour. I'm sure lots of people on the call would have more knowledge than me and would be able to explain why that's so important. But instinctively, it seems to make sense to everyone. So I guess, how can you help us, and maybe how can we help you? So we're wanting to set up another 7 nurseries in the next 12 months or earlier. So we'd be really interested in anyone that's got space for a nursery. It could be as big as that, it could be smaller, it could be bigger. We're open-minded. We're needing access to ancient and semi-natural woodland. Obviously, a lot of it is publicly accessible, so we can go there and we can collect seed, but we'd like to be doing that in partnership with the people that are managing the woodland. Certainly don't want to be traipsing across woodland when it's not appropriate. And there could be ways in which we can partner with the organisations managing that woodland. So they might be interested in some of the saplings that we grow. We're certainly going to be keen to plant them as close as possible to that woodland where we collected the seed. There might be space next to the woodland for the nurseries. Maybe we don't need to transport the seed very far. So we'd be really interested in partnering with you on that. Knowledge and expertise, we're learning every day, and we've got some experienced people working with us. There's still a lot more to learn. So there's huge expertise on this webinar today. So I'd be really interested in sharing knowledge and experience with you. Elbow grease, as I said, it's a lot of work. So we're going to be setting up nurseries all over the place. We're going to need people that have got that tree knowledge, got landscaping knowledge, got general horticultural knowledge, and also people that are just happy to come and help out without having any particular technical expertise. And spreading the word as well. There's going to be a lot of people that haven't been able to join this webinar. And so, you know, if you're aware of any organisations or any individuals that you think might be interested in engaging with us on this project, you know, please do spread the word. We're really keen to make those connections. So that's it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Adam. So that leaves us with about 10 more minutes for questions just at the end of this session. So just to give everyone a bit of notice, I'm going to come to all the panellists to ask what you would like out of COP26 and also the Biodiversity Convention next spring. So just to leave us with a little top line message. But before we do that, Adam, just to pick up a specific question you've had to you from Tom, which was to ask what's the smallest area possible really that you could house a tree nursery?
Well, we do have this concept of micro nurseries as well. So as well as community tree nurseries where people can come along and collaborate in a shared space that might be on private or public land, we've also got this concept of micro nurseries, and that could be, well, me, I've got a spare veg bed in my garden. I've been hopeless at growing veg and I'm okay at growing trees. So I thought, well, I'll start putting trees in there. You know, and we've got people that are holding on to just 2 or 3 oaks or whatever they have self-seeded in their garden. So I think, you know, for it to be a community tree nursery, the spaces we've got so far are, you know, probably kind of, you know, 200 square meters, something like that. But we're really open-minded, and, you know, we'd certainly be able to get use from a smaller space as well.
Brilliant. So the message is to get in touch with Adam if you've got any space at all to contribute. Yeah,
brilliant.
Great. Okay. All right. So please do put any last questions in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them during the session. I'm going to go to Mark Cassidy. Mark, do you have any comments on what you want from global leaders?
I think it's, for me, better protection for existing woodlands. I find that probably many landowners are terribly committed to their care and attention, and at the moment my project is completely focused on the planting of trees. However, we should similarly be trying to protect the existing trees that we have. That would be something that I'd like to see.
Thanks, Mark. I'll go to Alex next.
I could probably come up with a few things, but one thing that I really want to see is for that cross-sector thinking and for leaders to give resources, whether it's subsidies or whatever it might be, to enable other sectors to do more for trees and incorporate into other needs that we've got for housing and everything else.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. And Ben.
Thanks. I had an interesting conversation with someone the other day about the loss of the rainforest in the global south, and I think that some of the issue, particularly say around in South America, where there's loss of rainforest for food production, for growing of soya, for instance, that's often driven by landless peasants who are looking to try and create some sort of living, and the indigenous folk of that land have often been shoved off in one way or another beforehand. So there's a sort of complex answer about world leaders really need to look at figuring out how people can live close to the land in a sustainable way, without it being sort of reverting to a land grab of sorts. And personally, I'd love those world leaders to maybe go and spend some time in the deep rainforest with some of those indigenous leaders and really listen to what they say about the forests and about our role on this planet. And then after that, you know, heavy dose of learning, come back and join COP26.
So a field trip out of Glasgow.
Yeah, beforehand.
Great, thank you. Adam, come to you last.
I'm just going to be a broken record and just urge them to make sure local provenance is considered when any planting project is planned, and also the aftercare as well. You know, we've seen some projects around the world where supposedly so many million trees have been planted, and just be really interested to know what the aftercare plan was as well. And you know, we've made mistakes over the years when we've been planting trees, and we continue to, but we're learning all the time. And it's just something that we realized very early on, that you know, the planting is one thing, it's the aftercare and that commitment to looking after them for the first few years is really important.
Can I just add a couple of follow-up questions there? In terms of when we plant trees, what's your view on the kind of plastic wrappings that are often used to support very young trees, and how we need to deal with those? That's one question. And the second is, can you say a bit more about your vision for more locally sourced trees? What kind of trees do you want to see to be more prevalent across Baines?
Yes, in terms of the plastic thing, I mean, that's a challenge. No one wants to be using plastic, and particularly, you know, when it starts breaking up and falling apart into little bits that you can't really get rid of. We so far have found biodegradable stuff more expensive and doesn't last as long, but I think things are getting better, and we can see organisations like the Woodland Trust putting very big orders in, so hopefully that will help drive the cost down for the rest of us. But yeah, of course, we'd rather not be using plastic, but the reality is you need to look at what is going on in that site. Are there rabbits? Are there deer? And you know, they're going to need to be protected somehow. You know, yes, you could plant them without protection, some of them will survive for sure, but your survival rate is going to be a lot higher with protection when you've got that wildlife. And I've forgotten what your second question was, sorry.
It was asking you about what your vision would be for Baines. What are the trees that you want to see planted and, you know, spread out across our area? The trees.
So it's interesting. I mean, there's been a couple of questions about what about our changing climate and what trees are we planting to cope with the changing climate. And, you know, we've got the harsh reality that we're in kind of adaptation mode, you know, rather than avoidance really of climate change. And obviously we can slow it down. And I certainly don't have a defeatist attitude. I mean, we're still really focused on native. I can't quite bring myself to not be focused on native. But I think, you know, parks and woodlands, there's a bit more flexibility there in terms of, you know, it's more appropriate to be planting non-natives, and you could certainly be thinking about what might cope with hotter, harsher climates moving forwards.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, well, we're a couple of minutes away from the end, so I'll bring things to a close unless there's any urgent final questions. But thank you very much to our panel for taking part in this evening's event. It's been really, really interesting, and I hope the fact that it's going to go up on the Council's YouTube channel will mean that more people are able to see it and to access some of the material. It's been great to see people networking and making connections through the chat during the session, so it's done its purpose as far as that's concerned. I'll copy or try to copy all the info out of the chat now so that we can keep it. And if anybody would like a set of the slides and don't want to relive it again on YouTube, please get in touch with me or Michaela directly. So thanks very much again, everybody, and see you again soon.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, bye.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everyone. Nice work.
Thank you all.